So this is part 2 of building our login functionality. And the first thing that I want to do in this video is to conditionally rendering this part of the page. And so what that means is to render these login and sign up buttons here in case the user is not logged in, and in case the user is in fact logged in, well, then render some kind of user menu here and also a logout button. And so that kind of rendering should of course happen on the backend, so in one of our Pug templates. Now, how will our template actually know if the user is logged in or not? Well, actually, in order to determine that, we will have to create a new middleware function. And really, the only goal of this new middleware function is going to be if the user is currently logged in or not. Now, you might think that our protect middleware also does something similar, and actually it is similar. But the difference is that one only works for protected routes, so that makes sense, right? But our new middleware function is going to be running for each and every single request on our rendered website. Alright? Anyway, let's now put that in practice right here in our auth controller. And since it's very similar to the protect route, or actually middleware, I will go ahead and copy this one here and then just do some modifications. Okay? So let's copy it and paste it here. And this one is going to be called is logged in. So this middleware is really only for rendered pages. So the goal here is not to protect any route. And so there will never be an error in this middleware. Okay, let's actually quickly write that here. Only for rendered pages. And there will be no errors. Okay, so our token should come from the cookies and not from an authorization header because, of course, for rendered pages, we will not have the token in the header. Okay, so again, for our entire rendered website, the token will always only be sent using the cookie and never the authorization header. That one is only for the API. Okay, and actually it doesn't need to be as complex as this. We can simply say to execute all the code that we have here if there is a token. Or actually, if there is a cookie called JWT, basically. Okay? So let's remove all of this and basically put it in here. So I will remove this one and put it at the end. Okay? And then that reformats it. Now this token here does not exist. It is simply request cookies .jwt. Okay. So this here verifies the token. Then we also need to check if the user still exists. And so everything from here is going to be very similar to what we had before, with the big exception that we will not be creating any new errors. Okay, we will simply move on to the next middleware, but nothing will happen. Alright, then we also want to check if the user recently changed their password, and again, if so, then no error. Now here in the end, what's going to happen if all of this here is correct, so if the token is verified, if the user still exists, and if they didn't change their password, well, in that case, it means that there is a logged in user. Let's put that here. So there is a logged in user. And so what we want to do in this case is to make that user accessible to our templates. And how can we do that? Well, that's actually something that we didn't do before. And so this is now a nice place to actually learn that. So we can do response.locals and then put any variable in there. And our Pug templates will then get access to them. So if I say response.locals.user, then inside of a template, there will be a variable called user. All right. So again, each and every Pug template will have access to response.locals. Okay. And whatever we put there will then be a variable inside of these templates. So it's a little bit like passing data into a template using the render function, right? So this one we no longer need because we will put this current user on response.locals. And then, of course, after that, the next middleware is called. And we also need to do that outside of this if. So in case there is no cookie, then of course the next middleware will be called right away, because then of course there's no way that there actually is a logged in user. So again, if there is no cookie, then there is no logged in user. And so next right away, and we will not put the current user on response.locals. Okay, but if there is a cookie, well, then we go through all these verification steps, and in the end, if none of them called the next middleware in the stack, well, then that means that there is a logged in user. And so therefore, we put that user into response.locals. And like that, we then have access to that user in our Pug templates. So for example, right here in the header, which is actually where that user navigation will be. Okay, so let's actually use that here in a second. But before we do, of course, also need that new middleware that we just created. Okay, and so let's come here to view routes. Okay, and as I was saying in the beginning, we want this middleware to be applied to every single route that we have here. And so we do that a bit like we did before with the protect middleware. So basically putting it here before all the other routes. And so then it will be put in the middleware stack for each and every request that comes in. So router.use auth controller is logged in. Okay, and let's also remove this protect from the tour detail page because that doesn't make any sense actually. And so now we're actually ready to use this. And so let's come here to our header and use a conditional. Okay, now remember how I said before that the conditionals in Pug were not very powerful, and so many times we actually use JavaScript. But for what we want to do now, they're actually good enough. So all we want to do now is to say if user. Okay, and for that they work just fine for very simple stuff, simply for testing if a variable does exist or not. All right, so if there is a user, then we want to display this, what we have here. And so let's actually put that there. So I'm copying it here, commenting out this code, and then here we say else. So just like in JavaScript, we can say if else. Then here I actually don't want my bookings, but instead I want a logout. I'm not sure why that is there. So it's logout, and it also has a special class, which I created to make it look special in CSS. So nav, L, and then with the modifier, a logout. And let's also remove this href attribute from there. Then here we want the name of the user. So user.name, and actually we only want the first name. So for example, if I created an account called Jonas Schmettmann, so like this, then I only want to display the Jonas part here. All right, and so let's split the name using spaces, and then only display the first element of the resulting array. And so remember that here we can simply use JavaScript like this. Split it by a space, and then only the first element. Then here, of course, we also want that picture. So that's image / users, remember, I believe at least. So image, yeah, so here we go, users. And then whatever comes from our database. So user.photo, and then we can also give it a nice alternative text, which is very important for accessibility. And so let's get it right here. Okay. So let's test this out now, because I'm actually really curious to see if this works. Okay, so just like before, let me actually go ahead and delete the cookie here. Well, I'm not sure what this local storage is doing here now, but let's remove that as well. And this cookie as well. So let's move back to login here. And now I will have to retype this .io test 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's just go ahead and copy it here. Login. And indeed, we are successfully logged in. So we get our cookie now. Here we go. But of course, our user photo and name was not immediately displayed up here. And that is of course because this can only happen after a reload, because it is Express who renders these pages, and so there kind of needs to be a reload. Okay, so let's actually implement that in a second. But for now, let's see if actually we are now logged in. So let's go to all tours here. And now we get this error here. Let's try to reload here. Well, says it can't find it on the server. What happens if we reload here? Well, this one works. And you see that actually our user menu is already here. So we get our logout button and a picture and of course my name. Great. Now let's try to basically log out by deleting this cookie. And in the next video, we will actually implement this exact functionality. Okay. And if we reload now, then it is back. Great. So the middleware function that we just created before is actually doing its job. Let's just log in as someone else here. So let's say Laura. All right. So Laura, and then with the same password, test 1, 2, 3, 4. Login. It is okay. Reload. And there we go. So this is working just great. I'm just worried about this error. And so before we do anything else, we need to actually fix this one. And since this error only started once we started using this new middleware, let's just to make sure, see if it has something to do with that. So if we remove this middleware, let's see if this is back to working. And yeah, it does now. So that's a bit weird indeed. And so let's take a look if we can find some bug in this middleware function. And well, what I see here right away is that we always return each time that we call next, but here in the next one we don't. And so that means that in case we enter this block here, the next middleware will be called, but then again the next middleware will be called after that. Okay, and so we probably need to return this one here as well. Okay, and with this we make sure that next is only ever called once. So let's try that. Put this one here back on, give it a save. Actually, let's scroll down here. And yeah, that works now. So we get our logged in user here as well now. And so, of course, if we delete the cookie, basically logging the user out, reload this now, then we're back to normal. All right. Now, next up, what we wanted to fix here is to actually get an alert here, and also then to reload the page after some time. Okay, not really reloading actually, but instead sending it back to the home page. Okay, so right now here this is gone, and as I said earlier, we only ever see that user menu when we reload the page. And so that's what we will do now automatically in our JavaScript code here. All right. So let's get, first of all, rid of this data here. So logging sensitive data to the console is never a good idea. And now let's do what I just said before. So here we do our request. And of course, I will also show you how we can send data directly from an HTML form into our Node application. Okay, so of course there are two ways. One way is to send data using an HTTP request, like we did here, and another one is to simply directly use an HTML form. And so that one is very important as well. And so a bit later in the section, I will show you how to do that one as well. Anyway, let's now show that alert and reload the page. But let's only do that in case we are really sure that our API call was successful. So let's say response.data, and so that data is actually the data that we sent as our JSON response. And so from there we can read .status and check if it's equal to success. Right? So remember how we always set the status to success. And now we can actually use that in order to perform this verification. Okay? And so let's use a simple JavaScript alert. So alert like this. And say logged in successfully. Okay, let's get rid of this. And also let's then after 1.5 seconds load the front page. So basically the home page. So window.set timeout, then here the callback function. And so in order to load another page, we say location.assign. And then we simply go to the home page like this. Okay? And we want to do it after 1500 milliseconds. So 1.5 seconds. Then, in case we were not successful, we do actually not want to log this, but instead we want to alert it. So alert, and again, this data here is actually our data response. So the JSON. And so from here, let's read the message property. All right. So that should do the job. Let's reload here. Okay, that's not the right person. So instead, admin@naders.io test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in order to see the error first. And so you see incorrect email or password. And so of course, that's because our password was wrong. So let's get rid of that, log in, and so logged in successfully. And now let's see what happens. And it doesn't actually reload automatically because before that can happen, we need to close this window. So once we close it, it should then do the reload right away. And so there we go. So we're now at the home page, and again, with our correct user menu rendered here. All right, perfect. So this part is completed as well. And now as a last step, I want to improve these alerts that the user gets. So instead of displaying these built-in JavaScript alerts, okay? And also we're going to do that JavaScript bundling that I mentioned a couple of times already, but we're going to leave all of that for the next video because I don't want to overload each of these all too much.